All right, well, let's get started. So welcome to the Fireside chat with the Google Maps API team. This is a chance for you to ask any one of us a question that is appropriately contextual to maps, and we'll do our best to answer. So it's just a chance for you to interact with us. And this session is being recorded, so people who watch later, it's not live stream, but it's being recorded, so people on YouTube can watch this later and hear the questions that you ask and our answers as well. So before we go into questions, and if you want to ask a question, just start lining up behind the microphones. We'll just go through and introduce ourselves. So my name is Ken. I'm product manager based in Sydney, working on a number of different Maps APIs, but probably the largest one being the JavaScript Maps API.
Hi, my name is Mike Perrow. I'm the engineering lead for Geo Down Under in Sydney, which includes our Maps APIs, Google Maps Coordinate, and some advertising products for Maps.
Hi, my name's David Wang. I'm also based in Sydney. I'm the manager for a number of API projects, including Maps API, Android API, iOS API, and the others too.
Hi, I'm Mano. I'm the lead developer advocate for the Google Maps developer relations team.
Hi, I'm Jen Kovnats. I'm a product manager in Sydney working on Google Maps Engine APIs.
Hi, I'm Andrew Foster. I'm the product manager for Google's Geo mobile APIs, so on Android and iOS.
Hi, my name's Dave Day, and I'm the technical lead for all the web-based APIs, Maps APIs, so things like the JavaScript API, static maps, geocoding, all those sort of things.
Hi, my name's James McGill, and I'm the technical lead for the Google Maps Engine APIs.
So if you have any questions, please just come up to the mics in the center. And because if you don't, we'll all, we're going to leave here.
Hi, I was just wondering if you guys have any plans to add support for tracking aircraft to Maps, to the Maps APIs or the Maps products?
Yes, I'll take that one. I think that's a good question. We have the Google Flight Search products, which are about booking, but I don't know of any plans offhand that I'm aware of to start doing live tracking of planes within that. I think if we were to just start doing live tracking of planes, you'd probably see it emerge in our consumer Google Maps applications before you'd see it emerge in an API.
But we can't talk about features that we haven't released. We're not allowed to say anything about.
Just postulating what would be
just
cool.
Just postulating, yeah. Sorry, just doing the thing that I always have to do with these.
Hello, I also had an API question. I was wondering if there are any plans in the future to have some sort of route optimization API or some sort of thing like that in Google Maps.
We have that. That's in the Directions API or in the Directions service. You can add in a number of waypoints and tell us to optimize it. In the Free Maps API, you can add up to 8 waypoints plus your start and end locations. And in the Google Maps API for Business, it's start and end plus 23.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. I'm going to ask a question somebody else asked yesterday, and I didn't really hear an answer to it quite. The person asked if there was a sort of a negative version of waypoints, like a no waypoints, places that you set as places you want to avoid, for example. Like I want to get across town, but I don't want to take the highway.
Right. We don't currently have that in the Maps API. Right.
I know you're not allowed to speculate about what you might be doing in the future.
We can't. It's a great
wants to speak
idea.
out of turn.
And certainly, if that would be a feature you'd be interested in, I would recommend adding it to the issue tracker as a feature request, because we actually spend quite a bit of time looking over that and are really excited to get input about what developers want. So yeah, if you do it and then get all your friends to star the issue, so then it'll raise up. We'll see that people are interested in it.
Okay. There's one other one that I put into the issue tracker actually today, which was about places, about nearby searches for places. I'd like to be able to do that along a polyline. like to pass a polyline rather than a point and see all the coffee shops on the route home, for example, or something like that.
That's a really good idea.
Is that, I heard
Not
that some people
something
have
that we
proposed that, but I
currently do,
haven't
yeah.
heard if it's actually coming down or not.
It's the phrase that's often used for it is search along a route, and at the moment we don't have that functionality. No,
Okay.
but start it.
Hi, we've seen some areas get Street View imagery updates. Has there been any thought put to interfaces to see older versions of Street View imagery?
That's an interesting question. I typically hear the question of, can I get access to older versions of the satellite imagery? That's the way it's typically answered. At the moment, that's not something that we're able to offer, so I don't have anything that I can say at this time, no.
Although for satellite and aerial imagery in Google Earth, we do have older versions, just not for Street View.
I had one quick question. Like, can you have an API where we combine the location and the camera, everything put together, so that you can take the picture and the location together with one API?
I'm not sure.
That's for augmented reality. Supposing if I'm going somewhere, I take a picture, and I also want to share my location together with one API. I should be able to do that and put my location and my picture on the Google Maps in the map. Right now, I'm trying to do it separately with two different APIs. The camera API and the location manager API. But if you have an API which does both of them together, then we can do a good augmented reality app easily.
Yeah.
Right now, we have to do it, with multiple things.
It wouldn't be that hard to actually implement that. If you have if you take a photo on a phone that embeds the location, you can parse out the EXIF headers, and then you could use that to determine the location the camera was at when it was taken. That's
No, we have to use two different APIs. Supposing if I'm writing an app, to have a camera intent, then I have a location manager intent, everything. So I have to get the location from my location manager, and then from the camera I have to get my picture, and then combine both of them together.
Oh,
Instead
I see. You mean
there is one API which does both of them.
You're talking about on a phone, an Android.
On the API level. If you get an API level, which says get my location along with the image. If there is an option, then it will be.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, again,
that
I
would be
think
good for Photosphere and so many other things.
That would be one for feature request issue tracker.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in general, one of our philosophies is to give small composable parts, and then it's the developer that brings all those pieces together and builds her application, and that way you can mix and match them however is the most appropriate to your application. Whereas if we start bundling them, then they start really becoming used for only very few specific applications, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that's what we found works better.
Our preference is to not control how you use your own data within the experience as much as possible.
Okay, we can have something like a fused API or something like that. Like we have a fused location manager now, right? Which does the cell Wi-Fi and the GPS together, something like that. One more question I had. Like, for example, I had once gone to one of the conferences where Motorola was displaying their phones. They said they have a barometer to measure the pressure. So can we have an API to get the pressure? That way, along with the location, you can have the pressure also together put.
Well, I believe on the Android devices that are produced by Motorola, you can actually access that sensor. So most Android devices don't come with that, but I know the Motorola Zoom did, for instance, and there was some really interesting work done in Germany by some researchers who were able to do things like determine elevation within the subway system using barometric pressure. So certainly, I think Motorola does expose that within that, and the Android platform gives the ability for OEMs, for phone manufacturers to expose additional sensors beyond the ones that are within the standard Android platform.
Like if we combine the location with the pressure, and if there is any tsunami or anything coming, we can know easily, that way.
Yeah, you could do things around weather and stuff like that. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Hi, I had a couple questions about indoor locating technology. Do you guys have a target accuracy level that you want to get to consistently when you're locating phones indoors? And I mean consistently. I mean obviously sometimes you'll be. Do you guys have like a target accuracy level that you want to hit?
When you mean for indoor maps?
Yeah, for indoor maps.
How accurate? Well, we try and get as accurate as possible.
I think this is a question about the hardware, right? So we have maps of indoor locations, and then when you take your phone into the indoor location, your phone needs to be able to find out where it is. And that's something that's typically built into the hardware that you're using, and then would be exposed, through the kinds of services that Android would perhaps build on top of that, on top of the hardware.
Okay. But for indoor, part of that is built on the Wi-Fi, and so that's part of the Google services that are done. So
I can say something here. If you saw Waleed's talk on Beyond the Blue Dot, they're doing some very interesting things with sensors, and his mission is 1 centimeter accuracy everywhere. So 1 centimeter is the target, I guess.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Not some random person.
I could just ask you. On that one too, can you talk about some of and you kind of alluded to with the hardware, any kind of hardware enhancements or any kind of anything you would do to enhance, anything you're looking at to enhance the indoor locating technology? Obviously, Bluetooth is one of them. Do you guys, obviously you talked about Wi-Fi and Blue Dot today. Are there any other ones that you guys are looking at to enhance that accuracy?
So I think that comes under a little bit the answer to the last question, in that I think between us on stage, we don't have anyone on the Android platform team here. Waleed, who gave a talk, it was either earlier or yesterday, it should be around the conference. If you come by the Maps booth tomorrow, we can probably point you in the direction of someone who can talk a bit more intelligently about that.
Okay, thanks.
I'm a little nervous about that gong. Is that for poor questions or for poor answers?
I was wondering about that too, because that was up here when we got here. So I'm thinking at some point we vote one of us off the island. So.
I've got 2 questions. The first is about the GME API, and I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that currently it's not possible to create a table. If that's true, I'm wondering if there's a timeline of when that might be possible.
I mean, either of us. James is the TL, I'm the APM on that. So that's right, currently it's not possible. What we did on Friday, this past Friday, was actually a soft launch of the complete Google Maps Engine API, it's SLA. And we wanted to start with a small feature set to begin with, just to make sure that we could sort of get it out the door, make sure it's really stable and get people using it. It's sort of a logical progression to be able to create tables. So it's on the roadmap, but we don't really have a date to give you.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the other thing Mano's just whispering to me to mention is that we have the option now to give trial accounts on GME. So if you're interested in trying out Google Maps Engine, come by our Maps booth on the 2nd floor and we can give you a trial account.
So my second question is probably a lot more basic, but it has to do with kind of maybe throttling through APIs. I'm not sure if all Google APIs, authenticate the same way. Like I'm more familiar with Fusion tables where you've got an application key and an OAuth kind of option as to how to do it, and whether throttling is different in terms of how much you can do, whether you use one or the other or both for the Google Maps APIs. Is that similar there?
So we've actually got a pretty diverse mix of authentication stories across the APIs.
Okay.
Mostly because of the historical, like some of our APIs are many years old, 8 years old is our oldest. So it's quite a different story. We are looking to go much increasingly uniform. So things like the GME API is sort of using what we consider the best of our current technology, and that's the sort of thing we'll be going towards generally.
Which is what specifically for throttling? Is it per OAuth, I guess?
Yeah, it's an OAuth based.
Yeah, so the limits in place for the GME API, there is a per developer limit tied to the simple API access key that you use when you're accessing the API. If you're accessing through OAuth, the tie back to your developer account is encoded in the client secrets you use for OAuth. That's used to make sure that in GME, because the data is centrally hosted, it's used to make sure that one developer isn't using up a lot of quota against someone else's hosting. There's also quota limits applied against hosting that you can configure as well in terms of how many requests are allowed per day and how much quota you have in your account overall.
Great, thanks.
Hello. I have a question about tracking assets with GPS. Since the accuracy is not very high, sometimes the points get very far from the road. And for example, if you visualize it in Street View, the point gets behind the building and is not visible. Is there a way to project the point back on the road via an API, or is it possible to access now the vector data of the road and do something with that?
So potentially yes. We call that feature snap to road. The idea would be that you have a trail of crumbs coming from a mobile device. The mobile device is probably on a road, but they do this, right? And what you want to know is which road did the vehicle go down and how far, and then where did it turn and what road did it go down again, right? So stay tuned for something in that space. I can't give you a date, but I'll say stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. I was wondering about what kind of data you possess in your maps regarding to, for instance, speed limits, the width of the road. Say we have a bridge, how tall it is, what kind of trucks can go through it, and such.
Are you referring to the ground truth project and the kind of data that we pull out of that and pull into the base maps? I'm trying to...
I'm kind of wondering about what kind of metadata you have for your maps.
Right, so I think unless somebody wants to jump in and reinterpret the question, I think what we do and we've talked about in our ground truth project is a lot of the imagery that we collect from Street View is actually used by operators to make our base maps better. This is something that the Google Maps team does generally. And a lot of the things that they pull out of that are things like stop signs and one-way streets and names of streets. And that's done in a hybrid automatic, as well as there's some operators who look at that. And that's one of the major sources we use for that kind of information and to verify that kind of information.
So there was actually a talk on that, the ground truth talk yesterday, which will be on YouTube as well. And they also talked about things like place names, so that's used to improve Google Places and the Places API, and a lot of that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really great. And speed limits was one of the ones that they talked about. Speed limit data turns out to be one of these ones that's really difficult to get canonical sources for speed limits, and this is kind of the only way I think it can be done, is by driving all the roads and picking up images.
Well, so I'll just tell you a bit of a story about speed limits. I had lunch with one of the engineers in Zurich who was working on this, and he was telling me how difficult it is because there's a difference between posted speed limits and actual speed limits. Right? Sometimes people drive slower than the speed limit, sometimes people drive faster than the speed limit, and sometimes that can change between when the speed limits change. And so actually creating a model of how fast vehicles actually travel and whether or not they're over the speed limit or under the speed limit is actually very, very difficult, because it turns out that the data is just very, very noisy.
Yeah, I was just thinking, governments, for instance, possess usually information about their streets and the street limits and such. Can you get that information and incorporate them into your maps?
Governments publish that. Actually, a lot of it's pretty hard to get it, but we do, whenever we can find open data, we do acquire that data. It's part of the ground truth project. is doing that. And it's part of why we do encourage open data from, particularly from governments to really get, so not only Google, but everybody has access to that data.
Hello, I'm Homing from Hong Kong. I've got a couple of questions. The first of all is a very hard problem. We still do not have Google Earth in the Hong Kong Apple App Store. Don't know why. Till now, because we perceive Google Earth as a very useful client to the Google Earth Enterprise. So if it's not available, that would be a problem. Yeah. And the next question is, I've heard about the Business Photos program as mentioned by some talks before, and I just wonder if the Google Maps API, no matter it's Android API or the JavaScript API, can able to call those business photos, I mean the indoor street view. And the third question is about the
sorry, Homing. Hi.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think I quite understood the second question. The first question was Google is not in the Hong Kong App Store, which
okay.
Shouldn't be. I've talked to Peter Birch about this, and he said that shouldn't be true, but I'll follow up with him on that. What was the second question?
The second question is whether we can, for the business photos, they take the street view of the shops, but for developer like us, we can call the street view on the roads. So is it possible for us to call the street view inside the shop to display on our own application?
So at the moment, it is possible in the JavaScript API to navigate to the indoor street view through just the user interaction model.
Yeah.
The only piece that's really missing there is giving you a programmatic way to find which places have street view and then doing that, like landing them directly into there reliably. But definitely, the imagery is already available.
Okay. So for the street is good. And also we have been longing for the map maker to be available in Hong Kong, because our customers usually complains about some of the map data. So but there is no news or timeline that map maker will come to Hong Kong. So we are looking for this.
Yeah. So we are rolling out MapMaker and Ground Truth around the world, and I can't give you a timeline for when it'll come to Hong Kong, but we're hopeful, and we've got Ground Truth in 40-some countries. Does anybody know off the top of their heads? Yeah, but basically most of the world. If you look at the Ground Truth talk that was yesterday, he talked a bit about MapMaker as well. So yeah, I mean, our plan is to bring it, to make it as global as possible.
Okay. So here's the last question, and the Android API for the indoor positioning launched yesterday, and I find it really accurate for Moscone West Center. But for building applications for our customers, they will ask whether this feature will be available in their venue, because they may not have that kind of AP density and things like that. So just wonder if there is anything that we as a developer can help them, like setting up APs or anything that we can do to help enhance the user experience or the accuracy on their venue instead of just waiting Google to come and take the data?
Yeah, so I think we'll have to defer this to you know,
yeah. And yes, you can see this in Waleed's talk as well, but there's an app in the App Store. Once you've uploaded a floor plan to Google, and just search on Google Floor Plan Manager, something like that. Once it's been uploaded, then you can get an app that allows you to walk around your store or your location, and it will map the Wi-Fi locations. So yeah, you can absolutely do this. And I think this is actually a really great way for developers to have business beyond a developer story, is becoming part of the Business Photos program, and then also doing this indoor floor plans and mapping to become a more sort of full service person. So people. And this is Homing Tang, who is one of our Google developer experts in Hong Kong. So he's thank you, Homing, for your hard work.
Thank you, Mano.
So there's actually, Wally actually gave a talk, I think it was yesterday, where he showed how to use the tool. We can do that. And the Android API today essentially shares the same infrastructure. So once that process goes through, you should be able to use it in your API. And it will just magically appear. There's nothing you really need to do.
These are probably feature requests, but in maps, getting transit mode directions, is it possible to coerce the walking portion of your trip?
Coerce it to be longer, you mean?
Yes, or to be a proportion or some minimum value.
We don't currently have that capability. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember a long time ago, 511.org had that ability where you could set minimum and maximum walking distances for their transit tool. Yeah, I mean, you might be able to fudge it with some combination of multiple calls and doing a walking thing to a certain, but yeah, there's currently not a way to do that.
Related, when you get directions, a way to have them transported over to your Google Activity Report.
Your Google Activity Report?
I think this is more a question about the Google Maps consumer application, I think.
Is that right?
Well, if it's going to be in your Google Activity Report, you have to be logged in, and it would be you using Google Maps.
Oh, okay.
So that's a good question. It would seem to me something that would be appropriate for the activity report, but I don't have a good answer for that because we're as an API team, we don't actually work on the maps.google.com product ourselves.
Thank you.
I think you were first in the front.
Hi, so I'm working on a project similar to the igloo upstairs. I was wondering if there was a way to get the equilateral projection of a street view coordinate.
Are we talking about the Google Street View or the ones that have been taken on your phone?
The Google Street View.
Not at the moment. We have the Street View image API, but that comes back projected to try and give you like the right look, and we have the client-side one, which does the projection in the browser to make it look right as you're moving it around. But we don't actually expose any way to get to the underlying geometry at this stage of the image. Yeah.
Is there someone that I can talk to advocate for that?
Yeah, if you want to have a chat to me afterwards, I can try and understand exactly what you're trying to do and see what's possible. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Or, Chris might also be a great help just there next to you. Hi, Chris. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. Is there any way to embed a sphere photo to info window?
I'm sorry, embed what?
I would like to use a sphere photo to embed to info window.
Photosphere in an info window? Are you talking about in JavaScript or on Android or iPhone? What platform are you?
Not Android. On the PC.
On PC.
Well,
Dave, you look right.
Yes, that's possible. So it's a matter of taking your photosphere and projecting it in a way that you can make a custom Street View panorama out of it. And then it's possible to put a Street View panorama within an info window inside the JavaScript API. So it is a little bit of effort, and you have to make sure that your image is in the right format and there's a bit of coding involved, but it's definitely feasible.
Are you guys...
Sorry. I can answer this one too. I created a project called StreetSphere, which does this conversion. So I'll show you that afterwards, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, to elaborate on what Chris said, he's got a project which, once you have your photo, then it converts it into a Street View panorama and makes it really easy to put it on a web page. So then it's really just, your job would be to take that panorama and embed it how you'd like within an info window.
Yeah, so that's street-sphere.appspot.com.
Any other questions?
Hello. First of all, congratulations on WebGL Maps. It made the keynote, so that was spectacular. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Spectacular. One thing that I noticed in playing with it is you can't look at a pole, for instance. So you can reach the North Pole, but you cannot go over a pole, or necessarily. So I was curious, because I have a very young cousin who loves Santa Claus, and I would love to teach geography with this tool. And I was curious if there was, like, what's coming down the pipe for WebGL Maps?
So the poll, you mean in the globe mode?
Globe mode, yes.
Yeah, I can understand why that's the case. Yeah, there's nothing announced at the moment, certainly. In current maps, this is obviously not possible because of the Mercator projection. Physically, there's no way to display that 2D in that projection. Globe lets us do that. It's not implemented at the moment.
Yeah, this is actually a problem that we had in Google Earth as well. And part of the problem is that we're basically implementing the imagery in these strips that end up meeting at the poles. And so then you would see this sort of infinite fan kind of experience at the pole. I'm not, yeah, we don't
so
have anything.
You'll see that we don't really have the infinite fan effect anymore. Like we've changed the way that we do that, but the code to make that happen isn't there yet.
We're still in preview mode, so, you know.
My understanding, part of it's the user experience too, just to try and make it as as difficult as possible to confuse and get lost on the globe. So if you're actually keeping the Earth always like within a certain range of rotation, you don't end up upside down or which ways. But it's obviously fine-tuning that too.
Sure. Yeah, that's something that does happen in Google Earth a fair amount. People get kind of lost because they've gone over the pole, and suddenly Australia's in the north, and that doesn't make any sense.
There is a learning curve.
It's also worth pointing out that the home of Santa is actually quite contentious country to country. When I was growing up in Scotland, I was always taught it was in Lapland rather than the North Pole. So we don't really we try not to comment on geopolitical concerns in general.
We have to be very sensitive around these sort of things.
Thank you very much, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Hi, I have two questions for you guys. One is, do you have a way to get the longitude and latitude from IP addresses on the server side? Because I was looking into that, but Google Maps didn't have an API for that. I was considering purchase like third-party company like MaxMind or something.
Yeah, so we have an API for that. It's called the geolocation API. And it's an API that's not freely available, but you can purchase as part of our enterprise product suite.
Oh, it's not free?
It's not free, sorry.
With all these open source things, it's not free. Maybe you guys can have a limit amount of requests, but the basic version can be free. Something to consider.
It is something to consider, but I can't comment on it further than that.
Okay. The second question I have is, are you guys planning to include any social features to Google Maps, like Foursquare, to check in and keep track of where your friends are, and maybe acquire Yup or implement something with Yup? When I'm on the maps, I'm driving, it's nice to see, just locate where I'm with the local restaurants with reviews and things like that.
So I think this is a question about like the new Google Maps, which was announced yesterday. And I guess I can't comment on their roadmap, but I do know that one of their key visions is a personalized map, and that the personalized map should have the relevant information to you that is location specific, right? So I know that they're thinking about those kinds of social features, but obviously, we don't pre-announce anything. So I guess you just have to wait and see what happens.
All right. Thanks.
I have a question about the indoor mapping, the app for walking through a building after you've uploaded your floor plan. So one of the things that was brought up in the talk that I attended was that the presence of people messes with Wi-Fi, and you're largely basing your location on Wi-Fi. So if I were going to do a stadium, say a hockey arena, would I be able to upload multiple walkthroughs, basically? Because the stadium is going to have a different number of people in it depending on whether it's empty, there's a concert, the game's on, like in between periods there will be people getting their hot dogs and messing with the Wi-Fi, but most of the time during the game they're in their seats. Does that really affect it enough that I have to worry about it? Sorry, that's about 3 questions.
So I think none of us is expert enough in this, but I think Waleed will be probably in the sandbox a fair amount tomorrow, so you could try and catch up with him.
Okay.
Waleed or Sarah, who was also in that talk. And I will say, I think you can re-upload location information. So I know they take more than one sample. I just don't know if that just replaces one or the other. The more different Wi-Fi routers you have out there, more Wi-Fi signals that are out there, the better, because we can then triangulate off of strength, and then it reduces the impact of people. So.
And you can re-upload your data, can't you?
You can re-upload your data, and we
move
encourage
you-
that, especially when floor plans change. So like a department store,
Right.
often they'll rearrange things.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Hi, I had a quick question about your lat long. I was wondering what datum you guys are using for that.
Sorry, which data we're using for where?
Which datum? Was it WGS 84 or NAT 83 for your lat long?
I'm pretty sure it is WGS 84, but
Yeah, WGSA for Google Earth. And,
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there. Hi there.
Hi.
I got a question about, are you able to display only one country on the map, or is there, or do we have to display the whole world on your map? I got a website that's only specific to one country, so obviously for me, only one country is of interest. Thanks.
At the moment, we don't have any features which let you individually turn things on and off, and definitely we've heard from developers asking for other things, like maybe not necessarily saying I don't even want to see this country, but maybe can you emphasize this state or this building or this road? The only thing I could suggest right now is bounding what your map looks at, so if the user tries to pan away, you just sort of snap them back, but that won't always fit the bill.
Another thing you could do is do something like a Google Maps engine layer using some open data, like natural Earth data, to put some polygons and highlight the boundaries of and then mute all the other ones using a styled map.
I'm new to Android, so I wanted to know what is the equivalent of Find My Friends?
Sorry?
Like the app that Apple has. Do you have anything equivalent for like Find My Friends? I mean, I know you can track people indoors, but you can track yourself, but can I track my husband or a friend?
Tor is nodding vigorously. Tor, do you want to answer? Former PM of the Google Maps API, now PM for Google Plus APIs, Tor Mitchell.
Wow, it was worth me coming. You may have remembered that in the keynote yesterday, Vic mentioned that there are 42 new Google Plus features launched yesterday, and obviously he didn't talk about all of them. One of the features that wasn't mentioned was that location sharing has now been added to the Google Plus app. So if you open the Google Plus app today, assuming you got an update yesterday, you look at the menu of options on the left-hand side. One of them is location. You can now define circles that can see your current location using the Google Plus app, and that's available across all platforms. Thus ends the advert.
Thank you, Tor. I think that's all the time that we had for the Fireside chat, but we will hang out, probably out in the hallways after this if you want to ask us any more individualized questions. So thank you all very much for coming.